Yes, that is right, folks. I'm interviewing the voice actor for 343 Guilty Spark in the Halo trilogy. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Tim Dadabo. How are you doing today?
Greetings, Reclaimers. I'm so wonderful, I think I'll shoot you. What's up, everybody? How you doing? Nice to meet you out there in the world.
Yeah, same with yourself, Tim. Thanks for coming on, and looking forward to interviewing you for however long it takes. So the first question I'd like to ask you is actually regarding your singing, because before you became an actor, you were actually a singer. So how did you actually get into the whole world of singing?
So what happened is, I used to be in a lot of different bands, and a buddy of mine that I worked with kept seeing the band, and he was like, dude, you sound so much like all the singers you guys copy. You should do jingles. They could always use a guy with your kind of chops. And I said, what are jingles? And he said, the singing part of a commercial, I said, oh, yeah, sure. Well, can you hook me up? So I went and met with a few jingle producers. One of them helped me make my first demo, and then I was off. Whilst I was doing that, I was taking a break from singing, sitting in a sofa in a very large recording studio, speaking with the recording engineer, laughing and joking. And a woman sat next to us. She said, you have such a nice young voice. Would you mind reading something for me? And I said, sure. And I looked at it and said, is this what is this? And she said, it's a commercial. It's a voiceover. I said, a what over? She said, the speaking part of a commercial. So it's like, duh. And I said, oh, okay, sure. So I read it. And all through school, I was an actor and a singer. And she said, well, that's good. Now, can you read it like you're speaking with a friend? I said, okay, so this is acting on mic. She said, exactly. So, and scene. And I picked a person and I read to them. And she said, awesome, let's go record it. And I did. And the recording engineer, same guy, looked at me and said, you've never done a voiceover before. I said, 5 minutes ago, I didn't know what a voiceover was. He goes, screw the jingle shit, dude. You should be doing this. And I was like, really? He said, yeah. He goes, I'm gonna turn you on to a guy that's like the king in this town, and you go talk to him and he'll set you right. And here we are years later.
Still doing voices to this day.
Yes. That's the short version of my story.
Yeah. And how did you end up getting into the sort of the acting of things? Because you mentioned that you were kind of doing it earlier before you did the voiceover work.
Well, it was during school. I was never really good at the sports that school offered back then. Now, of course, like I said, I'm an avid mountain biker and occasionally race, but there was no sports that I was good in. I tried soccer. I liked it okay. And then my girlfriend said, hey, you want to try out for the speech and debate team? I said, sure. And I found out that there was acting involved. I was like, okay, I can do this. And not only did I do it, but we eventually ended up taking state, because you compete against other schools. So I won all kinds of roles, and I won trophies, and first in state, second in state, and all that stuff. And I was like, this is what I want to do. I want to be a performer. I knew as a kid I wanted to be a performer. I just didn't know what. I started singing as a little boy. So,
wow.
Yeah, I was in my first band by the time I was in 7th or 8th grade.
Gee, that is absolutely mad and incredible. But you did eventually, as you mentioned, do singing in like jingles and stuff, and you eventually did voiceovers and commercials. What are the sort of commercials that you had narrated or sung in?
Keebler, Kellogg's, Raid, or excuse me, S.C. Johnson Wax. Golly. I did some kids stories, singing for kids stories, educational stuff. And I've sung as women and critters and all kinds of stuff, elves. So yeah.
So just a countless amount of stuff that you've appeared in.
Yeah, Jack, I've been very, very blessed that I've done thousands of projects, really.
Gee.
So, between singing and voice acting, I'm one of the lucky ones that I've pretty much touched base on every single aspect of this business, and done quite well doing so.
Yeah, that is absolutely just brilliant for you and everything. And we'll touch on a good few of the stuff that you've done throughout your career. Firstly, we'll get onto the video games though. because I believe your first voice acting that you did in a video game was Subterracore. So how did you actually get into the whole sort of world of video gaming as a voice actor?
Well, I'm sure everybody that watches this, especially anybody that's a Halo fan, knows who Marty O'Donnell is.
Oh, of course.
Or knows who Marty O'Donnell and Mike Salvatori is. At that time, they had a recording studio that produced jingles in Chicago, and they pulled me over for a lunch, and they said, "Hey man, we want to show you some stuff." And they started showing me how cool video games were getting, and they wanted to start creating sound effects and music for video games. Well, there was this little startup in Chicago called Bungie, and they were very small. There was like I think it was 6 guys back then. So we started with Subterracore, Oni. I did a thing called I played Jack Ingalls. I forget the name of that video game. And then then all of a sudden they kind of rushed Oni to get to this little game that they had thought of called Halo.
Yeah, and how did you end up getting that role? Speaking of Halo, how did you end up getting the role of 343 Guilty Spark?
It was the role I almost didn't get.
Ooh.
Because I was in there reading like a robot. I said, okay, he's a robot. He's a flying robot. So I kept sounding like a robot. And I was out of the room, out of the booth, and I walked up to the guys and said, "Hey, do you have any precursor renderings of Spark?" And they showed them to me, and I said, "Well, what do you hear him as?" And they said, "Well, you weren't quite there. We're kind of thinking of a maniacal C-3PO." And I said, "So you want him to sound a lot more real?" And they said, yeah. You want to go back in? I said, sure. So I kind of took C-3PO and I made him conniving and kind of an ass. And they were like, "Dude, that's it. That's him. That's him. Let's try to visit that." And then they actually turned on a doubler and a flanger on my voice, and they said, "Read some more." And they said, "That's the guy." So that was it. Because I walked out of the room, I almost didn't get the spot. I almost didn't get the job. And it was, Marty and Joe and Mike and a buddy of mine who became very, very well known in the world for writing great scripts. He's down in Texas now, but yeah.
Yeah, that's crazy how you nearly didn't land the role for Spark, but eventually got it in the end.
Same thing with Leisure Suit Larry. It was a spot. It was another thing I almost didn't get. Was Leisure Suit Larry.
Gee, for the same reason, I'd imagine.
Yeah. Well, you look at something and you think, okay, this is who this is. This is the descriptor. This is where I'm going with it. Sometimes within voice acting, they don't even know what they want until they hear it. And then they're like, okay, well, we can, or it's one of two things. They're like, okay, I didn't even think of that voice. That's really cool. Let's visit that. Or they think, all right, well, this guy can frickin' do anything. He went from here to here to here to here. So we can kind of bubble these all together and see what comes out. So, this person, this guy, this girl, this person can pretty much do anything we need him to do. So that's what happens with me a lot of the times. Thank you, God.
That's cool. But going back to 343 Guilty Spark, like a couple of questions I have for him, because he's one of the biggest characters you voiced. Firstly, is like there's a lot of sort of personality that Guilty Spark has, like a lot of mad stuff, such as the humming, the talking to himself, and all that. Was that stuff that you came up with, or did the directors say, no, that this is stuff we want you to do?
No, absolutely. That was something the directors came up with. They said, we want him to be, I didn't know that he was on his way to rampancy. He was truly lonely. And that's why he talked to himself. And that's why he hummed. He was very low. Did you, have you played the Terminals, or have you seen the Terminals at all?
Yeah, I have played the Terminals. I was even just going to ask you about them as well.
So that's when I really got to understand his backstory during the Terminals, because he was alone so long. First, he was truly lonely. He was a human trapped in this armature, and he was lonely. And he hummed to himself. He would talk to himself. Oh, that's a great idea. I mean, some of the things that I said were of my making, but and I, so that a lot of voiceover, no matter what it is a soup. Everybody throws a little something in the pot, and you have a delicious, a minestrone. A good actor and certainly great creatives and great words all get thrown into the pot, and some's gonna make it the soup good, and some's gonna make the soup not so good. So they pick and they choose. Our jobs is to throw stuff in the soup that hopefully they keep, or maybe they don't, but
Yeah.
throw stuff in, and they're like, get Dadabo, he'll come up with something,
Well, that's always what you want when the directors will go, oh, just get him. He'll do you a good job.
You gotta hope. You gotta hope you're that one of those people that happens.
Oh yeah, totally. You wanna hope. Fingers crossed. And going back to like the humming that Spark does, did you make up the tune that Spark was humming, or did they give you like a little tune to hum?
A little bit of both. Yeah, a little bit of both. Marty came up with a little bit of something, and I came up with a little bit of something. Just kind of humming along. Yeah.
And speaking of like the directing, especially some of the directing that Marty did, there's a lot of sort of talk about how Joseph Staten and Marty O'Donnell had directed. Joe was more, according to like the documentaries and how people would talk about it, Joe was more like, he'd tell you the backstory and the lore that was going on with all the characters, whereas Marty was more no nonsense, just kind of tell you how to do it really quickly. Did you find that with the two directors? Were they like that?
Sure. And both actually help, really. And it's funny because I know exactly what you're talking about. Marty will say, Joel, describe it to the nth degree, and I can just see the actor's eyes glazing over. I know exactly what you're talking about from the documentary. And it's true, where, he'll try to get so deep. Some actors need that to find the voice. And Marty will say, shorter, faster, now he's sad. Now he's angry. And I can pick up on both of those things.
Yeah.
Where some actors need that full, deep backstory, depending on who their character is and why are they doing this. What scene is, for me, it's why, where, how, when, and what happened before. So that's how you get to a really great performance.
Yeah, exactly. And it does help to, as an actor, to know both ways of directing.
Sure.
Because like I feel like some maybe don't know some parts of the directing, and then they end up falling apart because of that in the performance.
Right. Well, and the writer's always going to want to give you the backstory. Joe was one of the directors of, he was one of the writers, directors, story builders of the franchise. So, he's going to give you the backstory. So you give him the best performance. And Marty is, he's worked with so many voice people. He's like, okay, a little up tempo, down tempo. All right, now you're a little more happy. He's the musicality.
Yeah.
And Joe is the story. Honestly, he's a musician. Marty's a musician.
Yeah, exactly. As well as that in Halo as well. Did you ever actually act out your lines with the other actors, or was it just with you on your own?
You're always in the booth alone. And there's a reason for that. They've changed that somewhat, but there's a reason why they do that. If they loved your line and they didn't like the other performer's line so much, now you've bled through to each other's mics, and they can't fix that. Whereas if you're having a conversation with someone and you're both very close to the mic, or if you're, hey, look, you, if that's going through to the other guy's mic, there's no way to rip it apart. But if you're in two separate, now, if it's a big enough studio and there's glass between the two of you and you can see each other, then maybe they'll do that because they want the conversation to be eye to eye. You want to level your eyes right at this guy just before you kill him, or before, or as you warn it that you're going to kill them, or this alien or whatever have you. But for the most part, yes, you always, for video games especially, you work alone. Cartoons, I've worked side by side with somebody, but again, they have us way apart and there's glass between us. There's like a fat panel with glass so that you get much less or almost no bleed.
I see. Interesting. And, speaking of other sort of things that happened within Halo Combat Evolved, there was one thing that Marty actually mentioned in an IGN video about the script for the game. And he had mentioned there was actually a typo in your script, and that instead of having 343 Guilty Spark's name be 343 Guilty Spark, it was actually mistyped as 344 Guilty Spark. Do you remember that at all?
I don't. And I know what you're talking about, but I don't remember that.
Really?
I don't remember it. I don't remember seeing it. I've heard a few people have asked me about this, and I'm like, if it was there, maybe by the time I got it, it wasn't. Maybe by the time it was go time for Halo 1, which was way back in 2001. Yeah, when I had brown hair. I don't remember it being in the script. And if it was probably there a few times,
Yeah, because he had mentioned that, like, it was written as 344 Guilty Spark. You had said 344 Guilty Spark. And so what he had to do was go and take a 3 from a different take, and then it would say, I am 343 Guilty Spark instead of 344.
Well, and he's really known by so many things. The Monitor, 343 Guilty Spark. What does the Arbiter call him?
The Oracle.
The Oracle, yes. So, yeah.
Yeah, he has all sorts of names, all sorts of...
Yeah.
And then there's monitors that are, like, similar to 343 Guilty Spark, such as 2401 Penitent Tangent. I want to ask you about that, because he sounds super similar to 343 Guilty Spark, but I believe he's not actually voiced by you. So were you asked to voice 2401?
Well, there was one in the terminals. He had a very deep voice. I can't even get as low as this guy did. Perhaps. I remember him talking. He had a very rich bass voice, at least in the terminals. I'll have to watch some more of those again, because I think I know what you're talking about. But there was one scene where I was talking face to face with another monitor, and he had a very rich voice. I think they wanted them to juxtapose one another.
Yeah, possibly, because I remember when listening to 2401 Penitent Tangent, he's in Halo 2. You meet him in the Gravemind cutscene. I remember it sounding similar to you, but then when I looked at the credits, it was a different actor. I was like, oh, that's kind of mad. So I was wondering, had they asked you to maybe do 2401, or did they just give it to someone else?
No. And I'm it's kind of funny that they didn't, but I get it. I mean, there was several. I mean, in one scene there were several monitors all together, eye to eye, if you will. So I don't know why I was put over this ring, and why I don't know if another story is going to unfold. You just never know. It's a world that is kind of unending, And of course, I've done several characters within the franchise. Thank goodness. The ill-fated Scottish fella in the release of the game, he was ill-fated. He didn't last very long. Then there was Corporal Perez. I was the voice of Corporal Perez in Halo 2, and I was one of the prophets in Halo Terminals. At the very end, I did the voice of a prophet. It's at the very end of my animation demo. They're very different speaking. Most of them have a British accent, and he's a Marchoon. Yeah.
And speak to me a little bit about Corporal Perez in Halo 2, because I remember you mentioning somewhere else that how you got that role was really, really easy.
I was reading for Spark for Halo 2, and I came across this character called Corporal Perez. And, at that time, I think they were already in Seattle. There were some guys in Chicago. We were still recording in Chicago. And I said, mira, how come you don't read me for Corporal Perez? Don't you know I'm Spanish? And Marty said, Tim, was that you? And I said, sí, senor. I said, how come you don't read me for Perez? I said, dude, this guy, he lives in me, you know? And he said, hang on a second. And there was a full 2 to 3 minutes of silence. And he said, okay, go ahead and read a couple sentences of Perez. He goes, okay, you're Corporal Perez. Oh, okay. And I ended up doing that whole scene with him.
That must have been the easiest gig to get.
Well, I mean, God bless Marty O'Donnell. He and I have known each other for 30 years.
Gee.
So, yeah, we go way back. So, you know, it's just like there's a lot of trust that has been built between Marty and I.
Oh, yeah, yeah. When did you first meet him, actually?
God, in Chicago, back in the day, you used to be able to market yourself eye to eye, face to face, coffee to coffee, whatever. And I did a lot of that. And I went over to O'Donnell Salvatori and I met with them to let him know that I was a singer and a voice actor. And we just hit it off, you know. And part of the reason that they moved on is because tragedy befell them. Somehow, some way, their building caught on fire and they lost everything.
Gee.
And I mean, pianos and musical equipment, recordings from way, that they never could get back. That was before you backed anything up on drives. It was all on tape. If you lost the tapes, the stuff was gone. So that's kind of another reason why they, decided to go in a whole new direction. It was like a phoenix rising from the ashes, if you will.
And it totally was a phoenix rising from the ashes, because like the Halo stuff they ended up doing just completely not only revived their careers, but
sure. It changed their lives.
Changed their lives, you're right. And became their biggest thing they ever did. Like easily the biggest thing they did was make the Halo theme.
Sure.
So yeah, paid off well for them. Now, going back to 343 a little bit, specifically the lines that you did in Halo 3, because there's a little mode in the game, a little skull you can get called the I Would Have Been Your Daddy Skull, which essentially changes the voice lines and gives the characters funny voice lines and gives the Marines random celebrity voice actors or TV presenters in the case of Jonathan Ross. Yes, he is in Halo 3, search it up. But when it came to the I Would Have Been Your Daddy Skull, did you improvise the lines that appear in the game, or was
Some. Many of them were written out, and they told me what this was for. So, they gave me all these lines, and they said, go ahead and improvise, or, what would happen if Spark went through an emergency room, just at that time in my career, I was taking improv classes, excuse me, to get faster on mic. And, I did improv a lot, but yes, a lot of the lines were written out. They had stuff they absolutely wanted me to say. And any good voice actor will always try to plus a line. Again, they keep it or they don't. And I always say that, hey, I got something else I want to do with this line. Keep it or don't. And, they don't always keep it. And that's okay. But, you give it to them and they're like, if you see them laughing and they're like, okay, that's absolutely going to stay in the game, or that's funny, but we can't use that because we really don't want to get sued.
Yeah. Which lines in the I Would Have Been Your Daddy Skull did you end up improvising that actually got into the game?
Oh, that was definitely going through the emergency ward. I still remember doing that one. Oh, that looks like it hurt a lot. I forget all those lines, dude. This is almost 20 years ago. So yeah, it was a while ago.
Yeah,
I forgot what I read yesterday.
Yeah. Who came up with the line, I'm a real boy?
I think that was me.
Oh, that was so funny.
I'm a real boy. Oh, you're a moron. Yeah. Oh, you're a moron? Yeah.
Yeah, those two lines came up when I was playing Halo 3 the other day. I turned on the I Would Have Been Your Daddy Skull and just shot at 343 just to see what it'd do. And those two lines came up and I just laughed at both of them.
As you can see, I'm still on my ring.
You clearly are. Which, as you know, Sergeant Johnson tries to destroy, and so 343 decides to brutally murder him. which leads to the Master Chief brutally murdering Spark. So I'd like to ask you about that, because you really, how do I describe it? You were really able to captivate a robot dying. And I don't know how you were able to do it so well, but you did. So how were you able to voice Spark's death so well?
Jack, I'm really freaking good. Next question. Seriously, when we were done, Marty looked at me and said, dude, we hardly have to do anything other than add the effects. That was so good. We're keeping pretty much all of that.
Gee.
You know, so yeah, it was just, I knew he was going to die, so I ramped up for it, you know, and that was it.
Yeah. Well,
I'm not bragging. I'm just really, I'm very, very skilled at this job. I never wanted to do anything else. You know, as you can see, this is what I'm working with. I'm not pretty enough for no TV. I'm pretty enough for no TV. So I just got really good behind a microphone.
and it has worked out wonders for you.
I look great in a recording studio.
Well, you most certainly do in an audiobook. And speaking of audiobooks, you've ended up doing a bunch of audiobooks, 2 Halo ones, I believe.
Just 2, yeah.
So, what's it like doing an audiobook, specifically even the Halo one? Because I believe you had a lot of involvement in giving life to that audiobook.
The first one especially. Well, both of them, really. I said, okay, do you want just a straight read on this? Or do you want me to change characters? And they said, well, we know that you can do that, so let's visit that. So in Primordium, I started changing voices, and I listened to a few of the other characters, how they were played, and I tried to emulate them so that the audience and the fans said, oh, cool, he stayed with that voice for this particular character. So I listened to a few of the other audiobooks from the Halo franchise from Greg Bear. And I was like, okay, I'll stay with that guy's voice, or that choice, as close as I can. And then, of course, I didn't reveal that it was Guilty Spark until the very end of the book, because I wanted to surprise you that Chakos was indeed Guilty Spark. So I read in my own natural speaking voice the whole time. For the other one that I just did, Point of Light, she initially wanted me to read the entire thing in character, except for the narrative part. Anytime I spoke as Spark, though, I said, because he's in a new armature, do you want me to speak with a different voice but similar to Spark, or do you want me to stay as Spark? She said, no, I want him to have the same voice. She goes, he's just in a new armature, but he still has the same voice. I said, okay, done. And I just came up with, Australians and stuff. This, the big tough guy was an Aussie. I don't know why I made him that way, but I did. And for Commander Ryan, it was a woman. So I said, I'm just going to raise her pitch a bit. I don't want to come full off on it at sounding as a woman, but I'll do the best that I can. And she said, no, she goes, that's awesome. That's she listened in, then a producer listened in, and the recording engineer he's a great guy. We actually recorded that in Tampa, Florida. So he's got a great ear too. The guy, he's a very trusted friend. So yeah, that's how that happened.
Gee, that's really cool. And speaking of other audiobooks, I believe you've done a few other audiobooks.
I have. I think I've done 4 total. I just did another one called Island Mother. That's an awesome story. It's an awesome story. I don't even want to talk about it, because if you tell a little bit about it, you got to tell a lot of bit about it. And it basically takes place mostly in Hawaii. And that's why it's called Island Mother. It's a suspense novel.
And it just has a rabbit hole that keeps going places.
Yeah. Well, the cool thing is the author was very heads up, and that he wanted a woman to play the woman's roles and the man to play all the man's roles. And then he would mix those two together later. So, all the tough guys, and, some of them were toughs from the deep South, and I don't know how well you know accents of America, but I mean some of them guys, I mean this fella, he was a tough son of a bitch. He was a killer, you know, and but so that was he was one of the main characters in the book. But so you went from there to guys in Hawaii. Hawaii has a very unusual accent. So yeah, I had to listen to some voices from Hawaii to get those down real well.
Gee, that's really cool. And what's the name of the book so that we can get a little reminder of it?
Island Mother.
All right, Island Mother. You got to check out at least a little bit of it because that does sound cool. The suspense and like how it's put together. That does sound really cool. I better give that a bit of a listen.
It's like sci-fi and suspense meet up.
Okay, yeah. Then Halo fans, you have no excuse. You're literally playing a sci-fi game.
That's right. Don't make me come looking for you.
As well as that, you've also narrated a couple of documentaries as well. So what documentaries did you end up narrating, and what was it like narrating them?
It's really a heck of a lot of fun. For 10 years, for 10 seasons, I was on Science Channel from a company from UK, actually, which is why I ended up in the UK to meet them and party with them and record the very last two shows. It was called Outrageous Acts of Science on Discovery Science. I recorded a few things for Animal Planet, Discovery Channel proper. I did it was called, oh gosh. I'll think of it in a bit, but it was a disasters story. It was a series of, Earth disasters, from tornadoes to hurricanes to earthquakes to lava spills, all kinds of stuff. So that was kind of cool. It's very different. It's a very different read. You have to take your time with it. You have to really pick your words, the ones you want to pull out and the ones you want to hit. And it's a lot of close mic work.
Yeah, I could imagine. I can imagine it being very, but it's rewarding in the end, I imagine.
Oh, you bet. You bet.
I can tell. And I'd say another very rewarding role for you to get was Speedy Gonzales.
Unfortunately, it didn't last very long. It was a blast, but it did not last very long. Initially they loved me, but they said I sounded too much like Mel Blanc. And the funny thing is I tried to give them another read, but at that time they weren't having it. And then they heard a famous actor read it, and they loved it. So I was out and he was in, and that's Hollywood, baby. But it was a blast. I did do a few shows, and they're still airing. I also sang as Speedy, which was a lot of fun, and that's still airing. So yeah, that was a lot of fun.
But that's really mad, though, that they said that you sounded too like Mel Blanc. Like,
well, and I think at first that's what they thought they wanted. But because the show is taking such a modern direction, I think they wanted to steer away from that. And I get that. I totally get that. And this guy lives in Los Angeles. I don't. So he was as they say, he was in the room. So and now it's not as important to be in the room. Because we all have, if you've invested like I have in your recording studio, you don't have to be in the room. I don't know if you know this or not, but I just did a Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle video game, and I brought back an old character that was one of the original characters for this game, although they asked for a completely different voice. And his name is Genghis Frog. But again, I recorded that from the room I'm sitting in right now. I did Kung Fu Panda from this room. I did the last Halo from this room. I do, dozens of commercials from this room. So, or my room in my house in Florida.
So yeah, you have like two studios anyway. So like,
I do.
How did you end up building the two?
You darn well better do it, or you're not going to be working.
Yeah.
Most voice actors today have recording studios in their home. It's just kind of, if you're a carpenter, you darn well better have a hammer and a screwdriver, and that's basically what a lot of voice actors are doing now, if for nothing else, then at the very least to audition with. But most voice actors now have a proper mic and a proper recording rig. Hopefully, they've built out some room in their house to be a recording studio.
Yeah. You'd hope now, especially with 2020, they'd be out of business.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, because I remember speaking to another actor in 2020, Mike Pollock. He did the voice for Dr. Eggman, and I was saying to him, once lockdown happened, what do you have to do? He said, well, we just had to go in and do all the recordings at the home.
Right. This is called Crybaby Studios, but I could have easily called it 12 Steps Studios, because I take 12 steps and I'm down here in my dungeon.
Yeah.
Recording. Here we have like the UK, we have basements. You don't get those in Los Angeles or well, not most of Los Angeles or Florida.
Yeah, I see. And how many projects are actually at your home studio, and how many are actually done elsewhere in different recording studios?
It's 50-50, there's going to be the thing where the creative simply wants to get out of their, especially for commercials. The creative wants to get out of their office and go to a nice recording studio where they're pampered and spoiled. And some voice actors don't have the room, so they'll say, do you have a recording studio? We want you. Do you have a recording studio that's broadcast quality? And they darn well better be upfront about it and say yes or no. So, you go to the studio and, I'd say it's 50-50. And the good thing about being a voice actor in a recording studio is you don't have to think about anything but performing. So you give all your performance on that mic, not how's my volume level? Can they hear? Is there any headphone bleed? You got to play audio engineer and artist. And until you get that under your belt a couple dozen times, it can be daunting. So, that's why it's 50-50. Some people will say, hey, we're not going to work with you unless you have a studio. So, and that's fine. I feel badly for recording studios, and I truly liked going to the studios for the very reason I just cited. You don't have to think. You just get on mic, you get line up a bunch of water and some tea, and you go, and let the audio engineer deal with the sound.
Yeah. Which one's actually more convenient for you, recording at your home or recording elsewhere?
Oh, of course, it's more convenient to record at home. You've got everything you need right here, and there's no commute.
Yeah.
There's zero commute.
Yeah.
Think green, kids. Think green.
Oh, God. Has there been any sort of other voice acting that you've done, whether that be in TV shows or maybe even in movies?
Very little, but yes. There's stuff called automated dialogue replacement. I've done a bit of that. And then there's also, it's short ADR. And then there's also background noises where you might be the voice on a television that the actors are watching. So I've done a bit of that, not too much. Again, that's handled largely out of Los Angeles. There's very few what they call WALA groups in Chicago. There is one. And for the most part, they mostly do TV shows. And if somebody's shooting a movie here, they do them. But there's so much in the can now, there's not as much of that work as there used to be. And that's okay. Me, at this performer right here, I like to create. You show me what you show me a script, and if it's a character, you show me the character, and let me give you a couple, 2-3 versions of this character or what I think. I'm going to give you what you've asked for, but then being me, I go off on a tangent and do a few different things,
Yeah, absolutely. And you also have done your own podcast as well, called Creatives Flow with a VO. So I'd like to ask you about that. What was it like doing that podcast?
A blast. It truly came from curiosity. It spawned from curiosity. I wanted to try something new. And my curiosity was this: where in the hell do these guys come up with this stuff? how did you come up with a talking apple and a cinnamon stick? You know, how much weed did you have to smoke to come up with this idea? Or, you know, whatever, you know, where do you get your ideas? How do you come up with them? And it turned into a little bit. It started to turn a little bit from just that to creative thinkers outside of that box too. I talked to a few salespeople that were really creative thinkers. So, but again, I mostly started with producers and creatives, writers, directors, and I wanted to. There's a lot of voiceover podcasts, but they were usually voiceover to voiceover, maybe voiceover to casting director or talent agent. And that's great because people need to know that stuff. But I wanted to, it was my own selfish curiosity that said, how the hell did you come up with this? Where did that come from? And to find out what their day-to-day was like. And, you know, that's where it came from. So it was kind of fun learning how creative people think, how they think, work, play, when their creative times are. Are they disciplined or does it just kind of pop into their head? So those are the things I wanted to know.
Yeah, absolutely. And you even got to get Frank O'Connor, who was heavily involved in Halo, on the show. I'd like to speak to you about that interview because it was less so an interview, but more so a conversation. Because I noticed he was asking a lot of stuff to you as well about being an actor.
Well, Frankie and I got pretty darn close being in the franchise together. He's, I mean, every time I go to an event, he's there. So, you know, and every time I recorded after you know, Bungie became 343 Industries, Frankie was there. So we just got to be rather close. So that's why it was kind of more like a conversation, and it was a give and take, you know, question to answer wise. So yeah, I think that's why it was like that.
Yeah, because it was actually really good. It was a real good insight into the man as well, like just sort of, you know, because a lot of times when you see Frank O'Connor, especially when he was at 343 Industries, it was very, you know, it'd only be for announcements of whatever's happening. You never really got to see the person, I tend to find.
Right. I mean, if you want to see a bit of him, he's next to me during Real Men of Halo, if you have ever seen that on YouTube.
No, I don't think I did.
Okay, gang, you got to go to YouTube and pull up Real Men of Halo. It's me and the man that plays Sergeant Stacker, or actually, he's also Captain Keyes. Well, in the States, there was a very popular radio campaign called Real Men of Genius for Bud Light beer. And he was the voice of that. So it was very quirky and funny, and Pete was one of the guys that made it so. His name is Pete Stacker. So he and I decided to do Real Men of Halo, and I was the singer, and Pete, of course, was the narrator. So, and Frankie's sitting right next to me laughing his ass off because he didn't know we were going to do that. We were on a panel together, and he didn't know we were going to do that live in front of an audience.
So it's just completely off the cuff.
Well, we practiced it upstairs. Pete and I practiced it upstairs, and there was a couple people sitting around in the lunchroom, and they were laughing at us practicing it. And then we did it. We saved it for the very end of the panel. It was Steve Downs, Master Chief. I'm forgetting one of the Halo franchise guys. Cortana. Jen Taylor Cortana, myself, Pete, Frankie, and a guy who's since moved on to another company, Kevin. He's, you know, we were all sitting in a panel of probably in front of several thousand people, and Pete and I broke into this thing. And there's several recordings of us doing so.
Well, I'll have to give that a look. That sounds funny. That sounds very funny.
It's a blast. It's a blast.
I can imagine. Now, we're coming close now to the end of the interview, so I just got a couple of last questions for you, and then we'll wrap things up. Firstly, is there any sort of future projects that you're appearing in anytime soon, or is that all just NDA, nothing you can say?
You mean like video game type stuff?
Doesn't matter. Could be movies, TV shows, games, whatever.
Yeah, I'm always doing commercials. Right now, if you're in the States, again, I'm the voice of a goat. Affleck. If you've seen the Affleck duck I am the Affleck goat. So we're head to head. It's me and the goat. Excuse me, me and the duck. Um, and there's a few other little irons in the fire, but the most recent thing that'll be coming out is the voice of Genghis Frog for the new Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle game. It's actually out right now on Amazon, or excuse me, it's on Apple Plus Arcade. And there's another project. I can't really talk about it. So I'm not sure when it's going to release, but it's supposed to release this year, probably pretty soon. So once they open up about it, I'll open up about it. So there you go.
And a bit of a mad question I have for you, but it's going back to your singing. Since you've done a lot of singing and stuff, would you ever actually make an album with you singing on it?
No.
Really?
No, not anymore. I mean, in my 20s or 30s, absolutely. You know, I don't quite have the chops that I used to, you know, and if I had started years and years ago, I probably would have. Maybe now if I did, I've certainly done some recording for friends that I jam with, but it's a whole different voice now, you know, than it was. It's a little deeper, a little more husky. So yeah, it's not that, you know, Rush and Led Zeppelin that I used to do, and in those ranges.
I see. So there'll be no 343 Guilty Spark humming album anytime soon.
Yes, 3-4 Guilty Spark sings the blues.
And then the Reds.
That it'll be the Reds if you rate the album badly.
You piss me off.
Oh God. Well, Tim, it's been great talking to you, but we gotta end it somewhere. So Tim, thank you so much for coming on to the interview. It was great talking to you. So is there any sort of last things you'd like to say? And would you like to plug in the old socials?
I would love to plug your socials. What would you like me to say?
I meant your socials, but...
Oh, no, that's fine. I mean, I do have a Facebook page and I'm on LinkedIn, but that's boring to you. I have a you know, very small Facebook page where I post stuff like Jack and I have been talking about here. You know, I have some Halo postings there, and I do have some narrative postings there. Every time I get a new spot, I post it there. I just posted about Genghis Frog there. So, you know, as stuff comes up, I post it there. If that's of interest to you, I do a lot of stuff I do a lot of promotions for Nickelodeon, Nick.com and Nick TV. So that's another part of my job. I do promotions for TV stations.
Lovely.
So yeah, but that's it. So
I'm rather boring. I don't know if you want to listen to me or not.
Well, we had you on for about like 40-something minutes, so you know, I don't think you were that boring. I don't think you're that boring.
You're already tired of me, aren't you? You're already tired of me.
I'm not. I've just run out of questions. But yes, you can find me simply on my YouTube channel, Jack Lucas Caffrey. You may already be there if you're watching this on YouTube. So, Tim?
Yes. Oh, and I'm sorry. Look for me on YouTube. If you pull up Tim Dadabo on YouTube, you'll see me there too. Son of a gun. Sorry about that. There we go. There's more socials.
There you go. So we got the 2 YouTubes in. So
look at us, plugomatics.
So Tim, yes, thank you very much for coming on. And finally, is there any last thing that 343 Guilty Spark has to say?
Always save his head, dispose of the rest.